Hello, good morning, and welcome to our eighth session for this subject, ITAS 1. So we are now on Chapter 5 of Unit 2, and our topic for this morning is about Object-Oriented Programming, or OOP. So before we start, our objectives are as follows. Number 1, we're going to explain the Object-Oriented Programming. Number 2, explain the concepts of classes, objects, properties, methods, and events. And number 3, identify values and references plus encapsulation. So when you are going to think about an aspect of OOP, so we have thinking in an object-oriented way. We refer to OOP, or the object-oriented programming, as a way programming which enables programmers to think like they are working with real-life entities. So a thing with distinct and independent existence or objects. In real life, people have knowledge and can do various work. And object-oriented programming has objects which have field to store knowledge or the state of data and can do various works and methods. So the invention of object-oriented programming was no coincidence, but it is the result of a development which led to its creation. So it also refers to a modern software development methodology supported by most programming languages. And a common mistake is that people think that object-oriented programming should only be used for certain kinds of programs, and that for other cases or cases, it would be needlessly complicated. So the opposite has to be proved otherwise. And think about OOP as a philosophy. So it is a new way of looking at a program and communication between its parts. Now, you should always use it whenever we create or you create a simple utility or a complex database system. And object-oriented programming is not just a technology, rather it is a recommended program structure. And it's mainly a new way of thinking. So a new perspective for which we could analyze problems and new era in software development. Now, in object-oriented programming, we use objects, but not all of these are associated with the techniques and structures which are supported directly in the languages, which also claims to support object-oriented programming. So there are certain important points to know about object-oriented programming, and also we're going to discuss about its advantages and disadvantages. So for the important point to know about OOP, object-oriented programming treats data as a critical element, and it emphasizes on data rather than procedure. So the decomposition of the problem is put into a simpler module, and it doesn't allow data to freely flow in the entire system. Example of this is localized control flow, wherein you control the flow of the data into certain perspective, and just because you have to consider the objects and the classes. And of course, data is protected from external functions. Now, for the advantages of object-oriented programming, these are as follows. Number 1, it models the real world very well. So because we use cases, and it represented the true-to-life configuration for objects and classes. That is why it mirrors the real world. With object-oriented programs, they are easy to understand and maintain, and that the object-oriented programming prefers code reusability. So it means that you can recycle codes whenever it is fitted into your line of work, or the configuration or the things that you need to do about programming. And it's already created classes that can be reused without having to write them again. So that means that it's easier to put into place whatever classes or objects that you produce using a certain program. And object-oriented programming facilitates the quick development of programs, where parallel development of classes is possible. So that it makes it quicker or faster compared to other types of development. Now, with object-oriented programs, they are easier to test, manage, and debug. So just because, as you can see, during our examples, when we are putting into place the program that we copy-pasted on our online IDE, so it's easier to manage, to test, basta you know the structure of the program. So, ang pagpasunod niya, line by line, ang kung ano yung purpose ka line nga daa, or ang ano yung meaning ka code nga gina-encode ninyo. Now, let's talk about the disadvantages of object-oriented programming. So, with the disadvantages, the classes sometimes tend to be overgeneralized. So, it means that you overthink things. Paminsaran yung gilid mayad. So, it's more than just the disadvantage. Actually, it's an advantage. Pero, when you tend to overgeneralize, it means nga you you don't realize that the purpose of the object is directly involved within the configurations for the variables or the line within the program. So naga-confuse ka mo guys. That is why it is on the disadvantage side. The relation among classes become superficial at times. When we speak about superficial on the relation among classes, this refers to the relational database. Sorry, hibala, if you're going to study about objects on databases, you will notice that your relations among the variables are as follows. So one-to-one relationship wherein the configuration for one variable is being pitted into one value. One-to-many, so many-to-many, and many-to-one. So those are the kinds of relationship now that you will be thinking and configuring and testing whenever you are going to program object-oriented programs. So those are the things that you need to remember. Now, the object-oriented programming design is very tricky, and sometimes it requires appropriate knowledge. So that is why to reinforce your knowledge, guys, I think you have to read sample programs on C++ and C#. Most of the time C#, because some of the ginagamit natin permi. But in our example later on, you will notice that on activity number 13, we're using C++, and then for the activity 14, we're going to use C# already. So that bodes well with object-oriented programs, no? So with our example. So later on, just remember the procedure on how are we going to conduct our activity for this morning. And that to program with object-oriented programming, the programmer needs proper skills such that of the design, the programming, and thinking in terms of objects and classes. So just remember that object-oriented programming is mainly manipulation of objects and classes. So our next topics will be classes and objects. No, you will find out that OOP is made up of those two things: classes una, then objects. Okay, so let me emphasize classes first. Now, do you know what is the term class? So for your information, guys, the definition of a class is it is a set of commands. Yes, it is a set of commands. A class, however, allows us to do much more. And a class is a pattern, another terminology, that we use to create objects. So tandaan nyo da, again, a class is a pattern that we use to create objects. Now, it defines their properties and abilities. And object-oriented programming that uses class is sometimes called class-based programming. So the definition for data format and available procedure for a given type or class of object may also contain data and procedures. So these are called methods. These are classes, or example of this are classes which contains data members and member functions. So just like our syntax here for our program, we have to declare the car, which is the variable, as class, and the body of the program for integer as car, the car color, the float, and double distance. So let me emphasize, int is a variable for integer, car is a variable for character, so meaning if integers are numbers, car are letters. Float is a combination of your integer and character, just like your string. Ang string string is a combination of integer and character. So, but a float is a character also, but it is a paragraph. Hay ang configuration kay inyong car is only 15 or 15, no? However, magambal ka mo nga declaration ka float, character na siya, pero anang character nagalabot 127 kabilog. Ang car is only limited to 15. So example, if you are going to sa Google form ninyo bala ano kita, if you put your name there for registration, it only allows you to input characters. Kaya ang ngaran ninyo siguro hindi man tama kalabog. But kung ang configuration ka data or ang sa database ninyo or sa forms naga-allow or nagapangayo ka more than 15 kabilog na character, you are going to convert character into float. Kaya ang float naman nagka-contain siya 127 characters. So mula daya nanandaya kinalain. Now ang character is declared sa isa lang ka line, whereas ang float ninyo malawig na siya nga line sa text box ninyo. So for void naman is ang distance. Kung makita niyo the double distance and void distance. Double distance means they're going to declare the distance variable into a double function. Whereas the distance traveled here for void is you're going to go back to void, meaning back to 0. So those are the things that you need to remember about the syntax of classes. For our activity, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to have this one. And this is written in C++. So that is why on our online IDE, so I have to stop here now. Before we go to our example, I'm going to stop presenting Anay. Okay, so because na ano na siya, ano sa character dong ano ganitang ang sharing ko bala sa aton nga dang Google Meet is nag-ano siya hindi ko ma-share nga kabilugan. So before we go on with our let me get your reaction. Can you raise your hand, guys, if you're still following me this morning? Okay, very good, Enrique. Okay, thank you, Jessica, for your reaction. Okay, as well as Japet. Okay, so let's continue our discussion. So let me present my screen, my entire screen, so that you can see the activity. Okay, so for our activity, we're going to configure this for online IDE. Now for our online IDE, we're going to use CodeChef. Okay, so naka C++ na siya nga daan, guys. So all I have to do is to let's discuss the code before we have our activity. So we have here namespace include IOStream. Include IOStream is the library for IOStream, which is the library. Ang sa ano niyo bla, ang counterpart na kada sa C# is system. So ang first naton is example, if this is the code for C# using system, ang declaration, ang sa C++ naman include ang library niya. So we're going to include the IOStream library, and we're going to configure namespace as std as namespace. So for the class of the variable, we have car, and then for the public value, you have int car ID, meaning to say you're going to declare your car ID as integer and the distance as double. So the distance traveled and the distance display is being back to void, meaning the value is, before you project the value of any variable for the object that you're going to manipulate, you're going to go back and as 0. And take note, cout is for the output, and the declaration for the variable as car for the distance traveled is found on the int main, this one. So let us see if we can run the program. Okay, so we have to copy this, and then we're going to compile it, to paste this on our... Okay, so as you can see guys, wala siya close brace. So butangan natin close brace. Then i-run natin siya. Okay, so the car ID is 321 and the distance traveled is 17. So this will be your output. Now, if you're going to change, like for example, your car ID into 123, and the distance traveled so far will be 72, and you're going to change B plus 5 for the value as 8. So what will happen if you're going to press run? Okay, so the car ID is 321, then the distance traveled is 20. Okay. Okay, so display. So display sila. Stand nato 1, 2, 3. Then run. Okay, so this one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 20. So that will be your output for classes. Now going back to our objects, let's discuss what is an object. So the definition of an object is these are instances of classes. So that is the definition of object. One definition of object, instances of classes. So when you speak about instances of classes, these are the byproduct of your classes, meaning objects are byproducts of classes. So if you have ang classes, may ginatawag itang attribute, no? Or the characteristic of, just like you, na kamo as the offspring of your parents, or the mga bata, kamo kaginikanan nyo, may mga attribute ang ginikanan nyo nga pareho kainyo. Either pareho mata nyo, na brown, or pareho ang panit nyo, maputi kamo, pareho tsura nyo. So those are attributes, no? And those are the byproducts of objects for classes, because the definition of an object is objects are instances of classes, and objects sometimes correspond to things found in the real world. So objects sometimes correspond to things found in the real world. So the example of this is the graphics program that may have objects such as circle, square, menu, etc. You will notice that each object is said to be an instance of a particular class. And objects are accessed somewhat like variables with complex internal structures. And in many languages, these are effectively pointers serving as an actual reference to a single instance of the said object in memory within the heap or stack. So what they do is they provide a layer of abstraction. So this, which can be used to separate internal from external code. And the external code can use an object by calling a specific instance method with a certain set of input parameter. Read an instance variable or write to an instance variable. So objects are created by calling a special type of method in the class known as the constructor. And then a program may create instances of the same class as it runs. So this refers to the operation independently of your objects, and this the easy way for the same procedure to be used on different sets of data. So this means also that objects can contain other objects in the instance variable. As in the case of your array, or you will notice during our past example, sa mga for statement nato, for loops, mga looping statements, that you can see that there are looping objects within the, so those are objects within objects. the looping statement within a looping statement. So in prototype-based languages and the objects that are primarily entities, you must remember that no classes even exist, and that the prototype of an object is just another object to which the object is linked, and every object has one prototype link, and that new objects can be created based on already existing objects chosen as their prototype. So the example of this is this one, guys. I think you have two part of this. Now let's see if we can actually make this run. Before we run the program, let me describe to you what are the contents of the code. So we are using system, meaning we're calling the library for system. Then we have the namespace OOPS. This one, namespace OOPS is just the secondary declaration from the first using system. And then we declare the customer as the class. So ang class natin is the customer. And we have the member variables. We have public int customer ID, public string name, public string address. Again, integer customer ID is declared as integer in public, meaning sa public value. And the declaration of a public value is open to all and known by everyone. So why ginatago? Okay, because it's exposed in public. Public is a terminology in programming wherein you expose your code to other values. Another one is the string name. The string, the name naman is declared as string, and the address is string. So for the string naman, string is a combination of letters and numbers. And then the constructor for initializing fields for the customer. We have the customer ID is equivalent of this is 1101. The equivalent for name is Tom, and the equivalent for address for USA is the address. To continue with, we have the method for displaying customer records and the functionality for the public void display data. And you are applying the write line or displaying customer ID, name, and address into the console. So write line is the code wherein you are exposing the values of the variable into your screen. Then code for entry point. Okay, then let's see if the program will run, because last time why to nagrun amon nga program sa amo dyang activity. So let's try if kung pwede siya mag-run. Then we're going to copy also ang sa dalom. Okay, just add one close parenthesis kay kulang siya. Okay. Now before we run the program, what we're going to do is to examine anay kung may mga declarations variable nga wala ma-declare. Okay, so let's run first kung may output. Okay, there's an error because the program exe does not contain static main method suitable for entry point. So that is the error, man. But if you're going to run the program and you come up with this, it's okay, guys. You just print screen the output and as your output, no. Let's just anay, guys. Lantaw naton anay. Kung ano yung pasakaon naton. So let's try nga pasakaon daya and this one. Okay, error siya. Error gid siya, no. So constructor for initializing fields, then method for displaying customer records. What if what if we're going to add another abe? Okay, order good siya. But anyway, guys, okay lang. What you're going to do is to, para sure, nga hindi mag-error. What you're going to do, guys, is to run nga i-encode yung get. Don't copy paste this. Ang second activity. You just try, no? If error man gyapon, at least you did your job already. Na ano lang. Basta you have to try programming this one. Encode this. So this is for your object, no? Na. But anyway, sige. Ano man na be a code, so it's not complete yet. But just try. If you can you run this program, okay? Sige. So but don't worry if your program is erroneous or may mga error siya. Ang last natin activity, I will consider your basta you have to encode it nga by hand lang, by line, not copy paste it, so that you can try to troubleshoot whatever the error you can find there sa activity natin, okay? Now, do you have any question, guys, about our activity? Okay, guys, do you have any questions about our activity for this morning, activity 13 and 14? Why, man? Okay, I assume that you understand also objects and classes, no? If you don't understand this, just for your reading, you search for object-oriented programming. So you can see on that on Wikipedia. Then you have to read classes and objects. Pero if you're going to search it in Google, so you put their classes and object-oriented programming, or objects in object-oriented programming. So you that need to confuse the information that you can find on other sources. Okay. Now for your attendance, let me just print screen. If you question, you can post also your question on our chat box if you want. Now, please stand by for our quiz tomorrow. You have to get 2 quizzes ang last week and this week. Okay, we don't have any quiz last week, so I hope I can finish it today so that I can post it tomorrow. If I cannot post your quizzes tomorrow, guys, you can check out your quiz on Saturday. Is that okay with you? Is it okay with you guys? But you have to answer 2 sets of quizzes, the last week's quiz and this week's quiz. However, if I cannot finish it today, you can check it out. Today is Thursday, correct? Then tomorrow is Friday. If I cannot finish it today and I cannot post it tomorrow, you can check it out on Saturday. Okay, so that is all for this morning. Let me produce a screenshot for your attendance. Thank you so much for attending our class, and good morning, everyone. Okay, so thank you guys for attending our class. You may now exit our
Thank you, sir.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.